Good morning. Welcome to our daily study. Glad you're here. Take a moment and subscribe, like, share this video with others. Let's share the learning and spread it far and wide. I'm going to encourage you again, if you want to ask any questions throughout this conversation or you have a comment, don't be shy. We were discussing yesterday about that a shy person can't learn. You'll never know. If you don't ask questions, any context. If you don't ask questions, you won't know. Just like an impatient person cannot be a teacher, you have to have a lot of patience. You can't get angry quickly. Similarly, if you are a shy person, it'll be hard for you to learn anything. We tell the story about a fellow who passed away. He went to heaven, and a little while later, he was joined by his elderly wife, and they showed him around the gardens of Eden, and they said you behaved well in your lifetime, and you did good things, and we're going to reward you. This is your reward. Enjoy these orchards, enjoy all that food, enjoy all those experiences. You deserve it. And as they're walking, the wife looks at the husband and says, "No, what do you say? It's pretty good." And the husband, he's not reacting. He's not too pleased. He's not happy. So she says, "What's the problem? Don't you appreciate what we have here?" He says, "The problem, if not for all of your diets and forcing me to eat holy bread and keeping me off from all the junk food, we've been here a long time ago." When we talk about aging, when we talk about getting old, I want to take a look at the Torah and see what does specifically our section, our parsha of the week, tell us about aging, and more specifically about how we treat older people. There's a story about the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Hasidus, the author of the Tanya, founder of Hasidus Chabad, rather, who, when he became known as a great scholar and as a spiritual leader, people were coming from all over to seek his counsel and to learn from him. He was really, really sought after. His father said that a scholar has to be honored. A great rabbi has to be accorded respect. And therefore, he wants to honor his father. Now, one of the ways of honoring a scholar, wants to honor his son. One of the ways of honoring a scholar and showing that respect is to stand up for him when he walks into the room. Until he tells you sit down, until he passes by or so on, then you don't sit down. However, there's another mitzvah that you have to honor your father, your parents. So the Alter Rebbe would stand up for his father. Every time they would meet, there would be this conflict. What's greater, honoring your parents or honoring your teachers? Showing respect to your Rebbe or showing respect to your father? Who should stand for who? Who should sit down, etc.? And it became so undoable that the solution ended up being they're going to separate, not meet up together. And this way they won't have this conflict of who's going to honor who. The Parsha of Kedoshim, our Torah portion, talks about many, many mitzvahs, and specifically mitzvahs which are interpersonal. We've discussed them in these talks many times, and there are two general categories of mitzvahs. You have mitzvahs which are between us and God. Belief in Hashem, not to worship idols, keep Shabbos, for example, eat kosher. These are mitzvahs which are not between me and other people, rather they are between me and God. It's my business with Hashem. It's a spiritual type of connection, and every mitzvah is, but this is a mitzvah between me and God. It's my relationship to Hashem. You then have another category of mitzvahs, and that's the category of Bein Adam Lachaverei, like Shalom Chaver, friend. This is between you and your friend. When you're dealing with your friends, when you're in a relationship with someone else, there's certain things that are expected, certain things that are wrong, certain things that you're supposed to do, and so on. When you are in a relationship with Hashem, so there's two elements to this relationship. There's between us and Hashem, the mitzvahs that we do, and then there are the mitzvahs that because Hashem told us, we do them with our friends. We're nice to them, we visit the sick, hopefully you don't know any sick people, no one should be sick, everyone should be healthy, you give money to the poor, so on and so forth. You have this interpersonal, these types of mitzvahs. So our parsha discusses at length many of the interpersonal mitzvahs. how to treat other people, how to deal with other people, including returning a lost object, including standing up for someone that's older than you, and so on and so forth. So when Torah talks to us about this mitzvah, and literally it says, "Mipnei seva takom," you should stand up for a older person. What does it mean, an older person? And why should you stand up for him? We are respecting and showing honor to what this person went through in their life. He went through a lot. He's older, and we're showing respect for that. And that age, our sages tell us, is 70 and up. Now, I know there are different life expectancies, and thank God it's getting longer and longer. It should be much longer. We should live forever. But the concept, which, by the way, we will when Mashiach comes, the concept of over 70 years old is considered seva, is considered that aging that Torah refers to, and you have to stand up for them. But then the Talmud tells us, code of Jewish law, that it's not just someone that's over the age of 70, but an old person, an aged person is zeh shekana chachma, the one that has acquired wisdom. If you have wisdom, if a person is very knowledgeable and very learned, Torah refers to him as old. Torah refers to him as aging. And therefore, you are required to stand up for him to show him that type of respect. Okay, so when you acquire Torah knowledge, when you acquire that wisdom, Torah sees you as aging, as old in a positive sense. In general, old is a positive thing. Beats the alternative. When a person is getting older, that is someone who has acquired lots of wisdom. We respect him, we stand up for him, and so on. And our question today is, why specifically someone that has acquired knowledge and wisdom is considered to be a chacham, a zaken, an old person? Why don't we say someone that did a lot of mitzvahs, you did a lot of good deeds in your life, you accomplished a lot of good things, even if you're not old? You have two people. One guy goes around, visits the sick, arranges help for the poor, returns lost objects, is constantly doing mitzvahs, but doesn't study, or not much. The other person studies Torah, he's acquired knowledge, he has wisdom, but it's not his thing, it's not his style. I mean, he does the mitzvahs he has to do, he makes sure to give charity every day, he helps out people when they're in need. But if you're going to look at the two of them, one of them is a mitzvahs guy, one of them is a Torah guy. And we say the one that learns, that has acquired lots of wisdom, he is considered to be a zaken, a aged person. He gets that respect that Torah demands that you show to old people. And the other one, no, just mitzvahs. Why is it that when you acquire knowledge, that's when you're considered to be a zaken? But mitzvahs somehow doesn't do that for us. So, in Hasidic philosophy, and particularly a discourse from the Alter Rebbe, V'adarta Pnei Zaken. There's not a long discourse, but it's an important one, a monumental one. He discusses there the difference between study of Torah and acquiring wisdom and that of mitzvahs. In order to understand this, I want to look at any bracha, any blessing that we make before we do a mitzvah. There are two categories of blessings. There are blessings that we say before we eat, before we enjoy a pleasant aroma. There are blessings that we make upon seeing a wonderful, an amazing thing. But in general, these blessings are blessings of enjoyment. You're thanking Hashem, you're expressing your appreciation to God for the opportunity to have that benefit, that enjoyment. So you're about to have cup of coffee, which I did before I started. You make a blessing. You're thanking Hashem for this. And any food that we have, we make a blessing. You just heard some amazing, life-changing news in a good way. There's a blessing that's said for that. You reach a certain milestone, there's blessings that are said. These are blessings that we thank Hashem. We're asking permission to derive benefit. We're expressing our gratitude for the benefit that we're having. That's what these mitzvahs are. That's what these blessings are. But then you have another category of brachas, a different whole section of blessings. And these are blessings that we make over mitzvahs, before any mitzvah that you do. Minus a few exceptions that it's done during or after. We make a blessing beforehand, right? You're going to put on tefillin. You make the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, and they all have the same beginning. Asher Kiddishana b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu. You have sanctified us with His mitzvahs and commanded us. Then you fill in the blank, whether it's the light Shabbos candles, or it's the put on tefillin, or it's whatever it may be. The term that's used when we talk about sanctification for mitzvahs is the very same term that we use when we talk in halachic terminology about marriage. Kiddishanu, sanctified. Hashem made us holy and gave us these mitzvahs. He sanctified us, and now we do tefillin. He sanctified us, and we light Shabbos candles, etc. What's this term of kiddushin, of betrothing or marriage? So when a person gets married, halachically there are two stages, and it used to be done, by the way, a year apart. The first stage is called kiddushin, sanctification. You marry this girl. You give her a ring. There are two witnesses that see that. You could also do it through a marriage document. But you married this woman. She is now, I'm going to call it engaged, but it's much more than engaged, because if she wants to break the engagement, or he wants to break the engagement, they would need to give a divorce. You would have to give her a physical divorce. She's now forbidden to marry anyone else. She's technically married to him. However, the nisuin, the completion of this marriage, did not happen yet. And therefore, they don't live together. She goes back to her house, to her father's house. He goes back to his place. And a year later, that's usually how it was done. It could be done the next day. It doesn't matter. But it used to be done a year later, giving her the time to prepare herself, giving him the time to get whatever he needs in order for his married life. And 12 months later, they would get married. Now, today, it's done under the chuppah. They do both stages together. When couples get engaged, the engagement is not a transaction which forces them to stay together. It's a commitment, it's an agreement. You don't want to break it, but it's not like she's a married woman, or it's not like he's a married man. They have an agreement, they're going to get married to each other at a particular time. This concept is done at the same, now, these days at a chuppah, it's done together. First, he gives the ring, it's a marriage document that's read, there's two witnesses that see it, chuppah, and later they go into a room of seclusion. That's like bringing her into his house, which would be the second stage when they would actually get married. In our relationship with Hashem, we also have this concept of we're mikudash, we're sanctified, we are betrothed to God. As we know, our relationship with Hashem is twofold. You have this relationship that we have with Hashem, that we are in a marriage relationship. Now, of course, we are children to a father, we're servants to a master, we're subjects to a king, but there is this element of us to God, where God is the groom and we are the bride. What is the kiddushin? What's the sanctification that happens? What is the betrothing, that transaction that is kiddushin between us and Hashem? Hashem made us His. That is done through mitzvahs. When we do a mitzvah, we are now sanctified to Hashem. It's a certain holiness, it's a connection, we're attached. However, just like in the first step of marriage, in a olden day engagement, what happens is it's now she's prohibited to marry anyone else. She's his. And they must get married unless they do a divorce. Step number one is you don't belong to anyone else and you cannot marry anyone else. Step number one in our relationship with God is that He sanctified us and now we're separate from evil, we're separate from impurity, we're separate from idol worship, and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that we're so connected and invested in what He wants. It's like the groom that was engaged to the bride. She's not living with him yet. They're sanctified, they are betrothed to each other. She can't go marry anyone else, but they're not married. It's not a completed marriage. When Hashem gives us a mitzvah, that mitzvah connects us with Hashem. It separates us from everything else around that may get in the way. But we're not really connected in the deepest of levels. When a person gets married, when the marriage is actually completed, consummated, when it's complete, they have the not just the engagement or the erusin, the way it was called, but they also have the nisuin, the full marriage. She moves in. Then this relationship is an internal bond. It's a deep connection. It's not just some kind of superficial agreement. It's more than superficial, but it's not just surrounding or external, but it's an internal relationship. It's real. It's connected. It's husband and wife. It's soulmates. They are connected. Right? In our connection to Hashem, we also have two manners. And I want to use the example of clothing versus food. Tell the story about a great tzaddik who was traveling. I think it was Zushav Anapoli or the Melech of Dezhensk. I think both brothers were traveling. And they came. It's me and coffee, what can I tell you? They came to a certain town and they were looking for a place to stay. They gave them that community was very kind. They had a guest house for all travelers, no questions asked. They gave them some food, but they were treated like the beggars of the town. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew how special they were. They were holy people and so on. A couple months later, one of them had to travel for official duty, if you will. So he was dressed in the proper clothing. He was dressed like the rabbi who he was. People recognized him. They knew him. And he walks into town. And right away, he is grabbed by the wealthiest person in town. And he says, no, you don't go to the guest house. You're going to come to my house. And the guest house is for certain other types of people. And it's not for you. And he treats him beautifully. And he gives him the best bed in the house. And then they sit down for a meal. When they sit down for the meal, this tzaddik takes the food and he puts it in his pocket. And the host was horrified. Excuse me, if you're hungry, I'll give you food. A little more he puts here, and he takes another dish and sticks it into the other pocket. And he's like, what in the world are you doing? I've never seen anything like it. And he said, well, you're not honoring me, you're honoring my clothes. Last time I came here, I was dressed like a beggar. You had me stay in the guest house. It's fine, but you treated me like a nobody. Now, somehow I come dressed in a certain suit. All of a sudden, I'm getting all these welcomes and I'm greeted and so on. Obviously, he was trying to teach him a lesson. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't discount people because of their clothing. Don't disregard someone just because of their external look. But there is a concept of garments versus food. When you wear something, when you wear a jacket, you could put it on, you could take it off. It doesn't define you. Okay? You may get a little bit hot as a result of it. You may get a little bit more recognition or has a certain formality. Or sometimes if you're in a certain industry and you put on a white coat, you're treated like a doctor. If you put on, to a certain extent, if you put on a officer's clothing, maybe people will be a little bit afraid of you and so on. Garments do something to you. They create a certain image. However, it's external because in a second you take off that jacket, you take off that uniform, you change, and now you're not that anymore. Now it wasn't you; it was an external component to you. When it comes to food, however, if you're going to eat something, it's going to impact you. If you're going to eat, it's going to change your makeup. It'll change your weight. It'll change your health. You absorb your food. It becomes part of your flesh and your blood, but it becomes part of you. And this is something which becomes you, right? And as a result of that, you now have a something inside of you which is connected to you. So there's garments and there is food. There's external and internal. In our relationship to Hashem, in that connection, we also have external and internal. Mitzvahs are external. Why? Because you could do a mitzvah. I could eat the matzah, or food is not the best example, but I could put on tefillin, right? And then I take off the tefillin. Am I a changed person because of that? Now we know, of course, that it's a connection to Hashem, and it has everlasting holiness to it, and it does something to us. But in comparison to Torah, mitzvahs, they're external. Mitzvahs are something that are the outer layer. It's an action that we do. It could remain external only. I could give a poor person help and then move on to do something selfish. It doesn't, well, I want to be careful because it does change who we are. It does impact us. If you do a lot of kindness over a long period of time, you will become kinder. If you're friendly to people, if you're happy to people, it will impact you. But it's all on an external level. If you take the next stage and you take learning Torah, it's a concept. You're trying to understand something. You don't understand it. And you think about it. And you process it with your own mind inside. And then you kind of get it. Then you have a question on it. Maybe you could explain it to someone else, or you can't explain it. You think about it. What happens with all of these processes, the knowledge that you take in, that you absorb, becomes part of you. It now becomes the way you think. It now has an impact on the way you process other things. It's part of your makeup. It is your logic. It's your wisdom, your understanding. And that happens when you learn Torah. When you do a mitzvah, it doesn't mean you're going to start to think like God. It doesn't mean you're going to start to think like Torah. It'll have an impact on you. You will become more holy. You'll become more sensitive. You'll be more connected to Hashem. But it's going to be a different type of holiness. That's why King David HaMelech in Tehillim, he refers to Torah. Torah is inside my insides, right? They say, I want to do your will, and your Torah inside of me. Because that's what happens. Mitzvahs don't go inside of you. Torah goes inside of you. And that's what King David is saying. That's what David HaMelech is telling us. It goes inside of us, just like food. Now we understand how when a person has acquired knowledge, Torah wisdom, there's a mitzvah to stand up for them, just like there is for an older person above the age of 70. And I should clarify that in many societies, in many cultures, old means different things. Sometimes old means older, the oldest. Sometimes it means in comparison to others, etc. But that's one example. Not one example, but what we're talking about here is someone who is knowledgeable, he acquired Torah wisdom, we get up for him. Why? Because that knowledge that he acquired, that Torah that he learned, that he understood, is inside of him. It's part of him. And therefore, you're standing up for that Torah. When you do a mitzvah, there are certain mitzvahs that we stand up for the person that's doing them. For example, if you ever had a bris, when they bring the baby into the room, everyone stands up. But when the bris is over, they sit down. Right? Why do they stand up? Because a mitzvah is about to happen. Or bikurim, which was a mitzvah that they would bring the first fruits to the Beis HaMikdash. So what would happen is they would take a farmer who was producing crop. As the season was progressing, he would go outside, and whenever he found a fruit that was about to ripen, he would wrap it with a string. And then he would know this is the first fruit. He would take a bushel of all the first fruits that are very meaningful to him because he worked very hard as a farmer. He prayed, he hoped, he did everything he could that he should have successful yield. And those first fruits that come out, they're very meaningful. They're very sentimental. They're an expression of, thank God it worked. And you take those fruits and you bring it to the temple, and you offer it to the kohen. It's a whole process of what's done. But it's done standing. Mitzvahs are done standing, many mitzvahs. But you only do them, you only stand for the person that's doing the mitzvah while they're doing the mitzvah. When they're done, you don't stand. Right? Because it's done. When it comes to learning Torah, that Torah is internalized by the person that learned it. So when he walks in, it's almost like he's carrying the whole Torah with him, all his knowledge with him, and it's internalized. And that's why we stand up for him. When a person learns Torah, it impacts him in a physical sense that even after he finished learning, even after he's not thinking about that particular concept, it's there. So this person has that specialty in them, and that's what we're standing up for. So we do many mitzvahs, and we get sanctified by God. By every mitzvah that we do, we get connected to Him, we get holy, we have that sanctification, almost that marriage, not almost, that marriage between Hashem and us. When it comes to learning, we have to work on that. We have to take the time to study and to understand and to review and to apply it. We have to internalize stuff that we've learned, that we understand. It shouldn't remain external. The whole point of Torah is that it comes inside of us and it turns into who we are. That's really the goal. So as we learn about this in the Parsha, I want to extend my wishes to everyone that we should actually live that way and take the Torah that we learn, internalize it, which will become part of us, and we should act on it. Thanks for joining. Have a wonderful day.